Welcome to the online course Youth Work, The Essentials, brought to you by the partnership between the European Commission and the Council of Europe in the field of youth.
Welcome everyone to this last webinar within the framework of the MOOC on Essentials of Youth Work. My name is Tanya Basarab. I'm from the team of the Youth Partnership, and also I'm part of the team of the course instructors and all of the other colleagues who have been working hard on this course are here with us today. So Katya and Darek will be co-facilitating, and Hilary will be making very interesting contributions from her experience and perspective as an educator of youth workers, as a youth worker herself, as a researcher on youth work. So we have, in addition to Hilary, two more guests. We have Yuliya Stankevich, who is a youth worker, a trainer of youth worker, and someone who supports also youth workers in their daily work. And we also have connected by phone, but with us nevertheless, Axel Stammberger from the German ministry in charge of the youth portfolio, among others. And in order for us not to lose Axel, we will have his contribution first. But before going straight into the content, exploring really what are the challenges of youth work today and what are the perspectives for youth work for the future, I would like to hand over the floor to, or the mic rather, to Katya and Darek, who could explain a little bit more about the technicalities of the setup of the meeting. We are meeting on Zoom, as they say, cogito ergo Zoom, but still we are also live streaming on Facebook. So if some people are following on Facebook, hello to you, and we welcome everyone. Katya and Darek, please.
Yeah. Hi, hello. Yes, I will start. Welcome again to the, as Tanya said, to our last session on Zoom, on live actually. Today's webinar is about the current debates, the challenges the youth work faces, and also about the future, what's going to happen, or what is happening, and what's going to happen to youth work in the coming years, what we can expect. And as Tanya said, we invited three people who will talk about it from three different perspectives as well, from the perspective of a policymaker, from the perspective, which is Axel, from the perspective of a youth work practitioner, which is Yuliya, and also youth work researcher, which is Hilary in the end. So you will have a chance to listen to three of them. And then after that, there will be a chance to ask questions. As usual, you can post your questions on the chat or in the Q&A section, and we will monitor both of them to see where you post it, and we'll try to group them and then ask the panelists to answer or comment on your questions. We also asked you in the platform, as you may remember, especially those of you who did it or who came there to the last actually bit of our MOOC, we asked you about the different, your perspective, your thinking behind the future of youth work. How do you see the future of youth work? There's a lot of entries already there, some like 80 entries of youth work. There's a lot of things that kind of repeat in what you are saying. There's a lot about, maybe I will say what we ask you to do. We ask you to think about what youth work will look like in 2030, so like 10 years time. So kind of devise a kind of strategy for youth work in Europe or beyond, because many of you are from outside Europe. So there's these few things that keep repeating in your entries. One is about recognition of youth work itself, but also recognition of youth workers. So a lot of you say that in 2030, youth work will be recognized as a profession internationally, everywhere. Some of you add that it will be recognized in different forms. One of the form of recognition is that it will be well paid as well. So this is something that some of you mentioned several times. Another part is about digitalization. So it's a lot of you actually mentioned that the COVID-19 situation we're experiencing nowadays all over the world will influence youth work, and there will be a big kind of shift from let's say traditional youth work to digital youth work. Doesn't mean that digital youth work will totally replace the youth work we are doing with young people in youth clubs and other places, but there will be a big focus on digitalization of youth work. Then a lot of you dream, I can say dream because we don't know what's going to happen until 2030, about very strong youth policy, and a youth policy that supports youth work and it's actually recognized, and the youth policy that's available everywhere. So in the places where there is no youth policy, there is a strong youth policy, and in the places where there is youth policy, it's actually strong. So something that we can actually rely on and make all our youth work practice based on. Then there is a lot about better cooperation between different institutions. There was a lot you mentioned about cooperation between youth work and schools. There's few entries about cooperation with schools, but also better cooperation between youth work organizations or institutions that provide youth work. And then few entries about inclusion and accessibility. So a lot of you think that by the year 2030, youth work will be fully accessible for all young people and will support inclusion of all young people. So this is a very short summary, of course, of what you put there. There's a few pages of reading. So go there and put your entry as well, and you can also comment on other people's entries. So this is something like a starting point for our debate today, because this is the voice of people who participate in the MOOC. Somebody's asking for the link. The link, I cannot provide the link here because it's in the MOOC. If you go to MOOC on youth work, there is the last unit about your vision of youth work, so you can find it there. It's all there. So good. I think without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Axel, who is, connecting with us on the phone. So Axel, yes, the phone is yours now.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my excuse is that I can only call in via phone and not connect on Zoom via the camera, but my internet connection is not so stable, and I want to avoid that. The presentation will be interrupted due to technical problems. The topic of youth work in Europe is a really long-lasting discussion, and was mentioned or was growing in the past years, and also mentioned in several political documents, especially the term of the European Youth Work Agenda raised approximately 5 years ago in the first time in the final declaration of the second European Youth Convention during the Belgian chairmanship in the Council of Europe. Things have developed on the different levels in the meantime, and in the 2017 recommendation in the Council of Europe, as well as in the 2030 youth sector strategy in the Council of Europe, there was a strong call for establishing a European youth work agenda in Europe, and on EU level the same request was mentioned in the European Youth Strategy 2019 to 27 in the EU. This year there's a very unique moment for Germany, as we have the EU presidency in the time frame from 1st of July to 31st of December. this year, and we will have the chairmanship in the Council of Europe starting middle of November this year until middle of May next year. So there's an overlap of approximately seven weeks of both chairs, which is really a very extraordinary thing. And I once calculated it happens for Germany next time in around 300 years. So I do not expect that we will experience that. So we said this is our time to make use of this special situation and to put this topic of youth work in Europe on the agenda of both chairs or presidencies. In addition to that, we decided already some time ago that we will also host the third European Youth Work Convention, which perfectly fits into the general idea to have it every 5 years. So the Belgian EU presidency starts in 2010, then there was the chairmanship convention in 2015 by Belgium, and now 2020 during both German chairs is the next opportunity, which is a very good occasion for us also to have this 5 years term or to establish this 5-year term on a regular basis. What have we done to prepare that? We have thought a lot how can we structure these chairs and the European Youth Work agenda, and we have had many consultations with different people in different settings. We have a European steering group accompanying the preparation of the convention. I personally was part of the high-level task force on youth work in the Council of Europe, and we also had some bilateral talks on EU level, for example, the European Commission on that. Then we had the big task to think about what is the European Youth Work Agenda, because in all the documents I mentioned before, it was said that we should establish or a European Youth Work Agenda should be established, but no one ever said what this agenda means, or it's not defined in any of the documents. So the first thing we thought about is the European Youth Work Agenda a document or is it a process? Which is a very important question when building up such an agenda. So we had many talks in all the several directions, and we came to the result it should be both. There are documents needed that describe a little bit this agenda process, and the agenda is also a kind of a process that has to be implemented with all the stakeholders in Europe. We then examined what are the political bases we have on the Council of Europe side. That was very easy because we have a strong youth work recommendation from 2017, and we have this 2030 youth sector strategy as basic political document. On the EU level, it was a bit more difficult as we had several documents dealing with youth work in the one or the other direction. But the real last document that concretely dealt with youth work was the Council conclusions as a result of the 2010 Belgium Convention. And so that's why we decided to propose a document during our EU presidency, where we presented the European the framework for establishing a European youth work agenda. With a special focus, of course, of the contribution the EU can give to this process. As we are all aware that the EU cannot decide for all the Council of Europe member states finally what is the European Youth Work Agenda and what has to be done in this process. So this document is negotiated since a couple of months, since the beginning of July. We will hopefully finish soon and adopt it during the EU Youth Ministers Council on 30th of November. But then we also had to think about how this could serve as a basis for the European Youth Work Convention. And it's of course very difficult if you know only a couple of weeks before the convention should take place what is the political basis and what is the framework for the convention. So therefore, together with the project team at our EU Youth Programs National Agency, Jugend für Europa, we developed a kind of an inspiration paper that gives an overview on what is the content of the European Youth Work Convention and what should be discussed during the convention with the several aims. In this context, we also had to think about what is the aim of our convention, because the aims of the two last conventions were that there's a final declaration that represents, of course, the community of practice in the field of youth work, but also sent or gave recommendations to the political level. In our perspective, that would be the wrong approach for our convention, as political decisions have recently taken place on the Council of Europe level last year and in the EU level a week before the convention starts. So we said the European Youth Work Convention should be an implementation conference where people do not discuss all those things that have to be recommended to the political level and what should have been done on the political level, but take the political background document as a basis and think about how we can implement, work together, exchange structures, methods in youth work, connect people to each other, and so on. So that's why this convention has a very, very strong focus on this so-called youth work community of practice, who have a very strong role in this convention because they are the main actors. So it's up to the people coming from the practice to say, okay, what works in our field? What are the things that are working good? What are we missing? Where's the need for new things? And how can we further contribute also to several aims of youth work in Europe? So the idea is to launch a longer lasting process and have this European Youth Work Convention as a starting point. We did not define how long this process should last. We originally, and still, of course, we call it the Bonn process, as originally the convention should have taken place in Bonn. Now it will be a virtual event, which only will be broadcasted from Bonn, but we really like this term as a reference to a process of developing youth work in Europe. So there will be now a preparation process also for the convention. So it should take place a preparation on national level, so that people will get to know each other within their countries and also know about the different position needs, problems people face in their country. From all the different perspectives, which means the youth work practitioners, the policy makers, the researchers, the youth councils, the national agencies, and all the different actors. And also we will try to ensure that there will be a follow-up after the convention, which will of course take place on the different levels. We are all aware, and I guess it's very important to emphasize this, youth work happens on local level and happens mainly on local level. So it's not a task of a European youth work agenda to change the youth work that happens on local level. It's more about improving youth work with several instruments, in extending the view on different topics, and bringing together different people who maybe follow the same aims, face the same challenges, but of course do not know from each other. The people participating in the conference, of course, these are a bit more than those we were limited in a physical convention, should serve as a kind of ambassadors also for their country, because we cannot, of course, integrate everybody in such a convention. This would overload all the different workshops. But we will try to ensure, and that's also kind of the preparation phase, that people know about their role also as ambassadors for youth work after the convention has taken place. So we hope that also some very good ideas will come up from the political document on EU level, and also several ideas stemming from the convention, which will then serve as a basis for future discussions in the different youth work fields in Europe. So I would like to leave it with this overview on what's going on with the European Youth Work Agenda. And of course, if you have any questions, I will try to ask them, but of course I cannot see them or answer to them in the chat.
Thank you, Axel. Don't worry, we are going to read the questions if they appear. So if you stay with us, then you will hear them. Thank you for highlighting the role of the European Youth Work Convention, and also the European Youth Work Agenda, which I think are very important instruments actually when we talk about the future of youth work. You can of course go to the website of the European Youth Work Convention, where you can find all the information about the convention itself, but also about the European Youth Work Agenda, with few resources that are there available, including the analytical papers that were prepared for the convention, highlighting different challenges for European youth work and youth work in Europe. Thank you again, Axel.
Okay, thank you. And please remember about the questions and answers during the presentations of our speakers. Yes, it's very important that you can write them during the presentations, but then we will have them on after all the presentations are finished. And now, as Axel told, the youth work happens mainly on the local level. And local realities of the youth work are very important, because finally all these realities of course form this European realities as well. But let's see the perspective of the youth work from the local level, and from the youth workers who work nowadays every day with young people and with other youth workers. So I would like to present Yuliya Stankevich, our next speaker. She is a youth worker and youth work trainer, and she will share with us the perspective, her perspective on what are the challenges and what is happening nowadays with youth work, and what are the perspectives from the point of view of the reality she is working in, as she is working in the Eastern Europe and Caucasus region and in Belarus, and how all the processes that are going on in Europe can influence youth work as well. So Yuliya.
Yes, hi. Just to check, you hear me well, right? Okay, good. So, hi everyone. As my colleagues were presenting me, I'm Yuliya, and I'm coming from Belarus, and I'm based in Belarus. I'm a youth worker, and last years I'm mostly working with youth organizations and youth workers as well a lot. And like also to give a bit of maybe a context, like this youth work, my identity is a voluntary, not paid, as for, and it's quite common for our civil society youth sector. And I'm also working as a trainer, also in international projects, and also in the in Belarus. So I'm going to talk about mostly about two parts. This is the challenges and future, and I realized that I actually really took the courage to talk about the future. So I will be very happy to your reactions, not only questions, but maybe some reactions. And the second part will be based more on how does political instability, on example of Belarus, may influence the future of youth work. And I will be mostly basing my talk on my local experience, and then I would love to also to get your reactions, also to see maybe something similar, because when I was talking to my international colleagues, many things were similar. So talking about the challenges, it also reflects a lot the situation that is now regarding the COVID, and it's a lot that we are getting online, and since then the challenges are that not all the formats can be transformed, or they are hard to transform online. So youth workers and also young people may face different challenges. Also, there might be also some kind of resistance towards online. There are cases, for example, when some organizations decided to pause their activities and wait for the moment when actually the offline events will be possible. And it's also true not only for the youth workers themselves, but also some of the young people. When there was some of the needs assessment, young people were rather choosing for to wait, and also for the offline events to get the energy and percent that they're used to. And also we were looking into the barriers to the online work, and we in March this year, together with Human Library in Belarus, we were making kind of mapping and public consultation with the activists and NGOs that are working with vulnerable groups with less opportunities, and looking what actually are the barriers, because before it was the advantage that was often mentioned, that it is becoming more inclusive, so you don't need to travel, for example, from the smaller city to the bigger one to participate. You can just get online. But we also saw that there are challenges and barriers that are also true for young people, such as the need for the safe space when they're home. For example, there is difficult for the teenagers, for example, to talk about some maybe sensitive topics. Also, it was true about the safe space for the LGBT plus people and some other people who are taking part. And of course, talking about the tech skills and internet connection, that is always an issue. I guess it's also something that you faced during this time. And when I was preparing for today, I noticed that maybe two most used words in my notes were uncertainty and flexibility. So one more challenge is it relates to these times of uncertainty, and we ourselves need to adapt, and also young people that we are working, they also need to adapt. And this dealing with uncertainty is also very important now, and I guess it will come to the future as well. So we were at some point we needed to focus a lot on well-being of young people and being together with them, and also looking at the youth work as a sector. I believe there is also the challenge of rethinking about the design of the programs that we are having, and this is where the flexibility comes, because there might be some different cases and opportunities also to see this transfer to virtual events, and still keeping these offline events that are important, but sometimes there are the circumstances that we cannot influence. Also regarding flexibility, regarding the funding, because what we were having that is we had to rearrange the programs, and this is also always needed to rearrange the terms of the programs, and also, of course, the capacity building of the of youth workers, of youth organizations regarding online work, but generally working in quite sometimes uncertain realities is also important. And when I was reflected on the future, and this is also a bit reflection from my experience of working with Eastern Partnership projects and with cooperation with other countries, that they still, though we are facing the global, the common global challenge, the realities are very different. Like regarding COVID, like most of the countries were going for quarantine, and the offline events were, for example, they were not allowed. But in Belarus, for example, we didn't have the official quarantine, so this was more the initiative of the organizations to stop and follow the prevention measures. But still, in some countries, some offline events might be starting. In some countries, not. So this is a very different realities. So especially regarding the cooperation and the common programs, we need this flexibility. But in the same time, for me, it is quite fascinating time, because a lot of things are made on a local level, and a lot of solutions are found, and I believe we will be building on these solutions a lot. So the exchange of the practice and the experience will be very important. And the second part, I'm also sometimes keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have some reactions, feel free to react. And the second part that I wanted to talk to you is about how does political instability on Belarus example may influence youth work. And yeah, just to start from where we now in Belarus, there was a time when like when this political instability started, when mostly everything was paused. So NGOs, activities of youth NGOs, they were stopped. So now, since it's 2 months now, the NGOs are starting to do this needs assessment, and starting to make the activities, starting to do some youth work again. Mostly responding for the needs. And as I was talking to the organizations, there is this generally this need to come to like a normal life, like to have some activities, to come for a meeting, or to lecture, or to participate in some event. And talking about the needs, they are also very much connected to the safety. So it can be connected to the physical safety. For example, the topics, how if the person is getting detained, for example, what is best to do, or some security measures, knowing your rights, safety in the internet, and these kind of topics. There are a lot of need for the psychological safety and well-being. So organizations go also for some events or meetings that are kind of maybe easy to speak topic with a lot of space for non-formal communication and non-formal talks, and like more creating the safe space. And it's also also the need for offline events so people can meet. And also for the topics, it's of course the human rights and critical thinking and dealing with fake news. And but also thinking what may influence it, and talking about the future. It's very hard to think about the future now. And generally, one of the traits now is that it is no long-term planning generally, and there is also a lot of flexibility on how people are planning. But generally, it is now quite low. Youth workers may face some low energy and burnouts, and also the safety issues. So some of activists and youth workers may relocate. And there is an issue also for the safety of the organizations. So and this can actually influence a lot the future, because if people relocate, if people are also having the financial challenges, they might need to look for the job. And this is generally also the second part. This is the economic crisis, not only regarding COVID, that I believe that is also an issue for many countries, but also regarding the political instability, and this is something that we are going to face. So this will definitely influence youth work. This is all for now that I wanted to tell you. If there's some fast reactions, I can react, or we go later. Okay.
Thank you very much, Yuliya. Yes, we can see that now we're living in interesting times, and really the situation is quite different from country by country, but all these challenges that you mentioned, like technical problem, the need of the safe space, burning out, instability, uncertainty. Yes, this is unfortunately these trends that are now, but also it gives a hope that it will also, we will learn new skills that will help us to be more flexible, maybe more creative. And also, one more time, I think you were showing how important is youth work now for young people when they are in this uncertain situation. And also that a lot of new tools were developed and new technologies. So we hope that together as a youth work community, we will overcome this, and all together we will find the ways how to face all these challenges. Thank you very much for sharing this. And yes, then I pass word to Derek.
Yeah, thank you. And we continue with the last input from Hilary Tierney, who is here with us with a beautiful picture behind. Yeah, who will talk about the youth work and the future of youth work from the perspective of the youth work researcher, and also will look at how we as youth work practitioners can actually influence this future. Hilary, you have to unmute yourself first.
Sorry, I spend my life telling people to do that. Yeah, so thank you to both of you and to everybody for being here. I probably have more questions than I have answers, but I think maybe that is part of the youth work conversation, is that it is an ongoing inquiry and dialogue and a coming to understanding against sort of shifting sands. I have indeed changed my background, partly because my living room is a little bit boring, but also partly because I thought that a rainbow might be helpful in the context of a conversation about youth work, because sometimes I feel like we always are thinking about at the end of the rainbow there will be answers, you know, and that's and that we will know. and we will be accepted and we will be recognized, and there will be a certain degree of, stability. So the pot of gold idea. But also, I suppose that for me, that when we think about youth work, we have to, I think about hope, and we have to think about youth work also having a future focus. So working very directly in the present, in the here and now, in the lives of young people in local communities, trying to influence what is happening regionally and nationally and perhaps internationally in the context of some of what we've heard about earlier in the context, say, for instance, of the European Convention, but also then dealing with the realities that Yuliya was talking about, again, working with young people in very diverse and challenging circumstances. And I think that that idea of flexibility and working with uncertainty have always been part of the landscape of youth work. And maybe we need to, in the context of the European Convention, one of the things I noticed today when I was having a look at the website, it was also talking about there being an opportunity in some way to showcase or to have recognition for youth work as being brave, for thinking outside the box and being modern. And I think those are interesting invitations. I think there is probably a limit to the value from my own perspective in youth work in looking for certainties. I think we possibly could be more usefully thinking about principles and then principles into action. So principled action, to use that language. And I suppose I've as I said earlier, I have different things that I could say, and I have lots of notes on my notepad beside me, so forgive me if I look to those sometimes. I'm also, I suppose, wanting to put maybe a little bit on the record that I do have the privilege, I suppose, of being able to have a particular perspective. So while my background is in youth work and youth work practice, and I think that is what formed me and formed my ideas, I am currently working in higher education, where I get to spend a lot of time with both students who are wanting to become, in the Irish context, professional youth workers. And by that, I mean having a professionally recognized qualification and hoping to work and have a career in youth work. And then also working alongside some of the local and national organizations here in Ireland to look at the issues that are facing youth work and youth workers, and how youth workers themselves might be supportive to I suppose engage with those at a number of different levels. So it's a very particular sort of perspective, and I'm conscious that it doesn't speak to where everybody is in the room. One of the things that strikes me, though, if we were to think about it in terms of youth work, and I hear it in the earlier speakers too, is I do think that youth work makes a promise to young people. Whether we decide, whether we talk about that in terms of profession or professionalism or professionalization, I'm not sure how important that is, but I do think we make a promise to young people. I think we make a promise when we talk about youth work, that youth work will and young people will be attended to and have a different sort of experience than they have perhaps in the rest of their lives. That they will be listened to, that potentially their voices will be amplified, that they will be safe. There will be an opportunity for them to explore who they are in the world, how they might want to be in the world, and to develop some agency in relation to their own lives and potentially in the lives of their communities and wider society. And I think when we talk about that, if we look at even in the context, say, just of Europe, and I'm conscious there's people here from other countries outside Europe, so we're looking at a very international sort of audience of participants here. I think we also have to think about, say, as I said, in the European context, there's a lot of talk of democracy, that youth work being important in revitalizing democracy, in thinking about how we make our societies more inclusive, how we are more respectful of diversity, that we live comfortably and companionably and collaboratively alongside people who are very different from us. And I think that's very challenging for us as human beings, not just in the context of youth work. So that youth work is and does continue to be, I think, having to be adaptable and flexible. And in relation to that idea about youth work being modern, I mean, youth work is a product of the modern age. Um, There's a lovely quote from Musgrove that says, in the context of English and UK youth work, is that the adolescent was invented at the same time as the steam engine. And I have to say, I really like that idea, because it reminds us that what we're dealing with when we talk about youth is a social construct in some way. And that then when we're talking about youth work is an intervention in the lives of young people. And that youth work in itself was not invented by young people, it was invented by adult society in response in some way to the perceived needs of young people, potentially the perceived threats that might be posed by young people or the threats to young people. So youth work has always had, to me anyway, an element of tension in terms of how it gets positioned and how it sees what its mission and its set of intentions. But clearly, in the European context, there seems to me that there's an element of agreement that youth work is in some way, as I said earlier, very directly connected to ideas around democracy and inclusion and voice and amplifying voice for young people. And of course, then we have to ask questions about, well, which young people in which contexts, how do we do that? And of course, the answer is that it depends. Youth work, as somebody mentioned earlier, is practiced in local context. It happens on the street, in centres, in homes, on the phone, online. It happens where young people live. And young people live in diverse situations. Young people are representative of all classes and genders and sexualities and abilities and disabilities and ethnicities. So young people are complex, so why would we not expect youth work to be complex? And one of the things I can heartily recommend is that people do check out the website for the upcoming convention, a third convention, and the documentation there is really very interesting and engaging, and I think the ideas there, particularly from Howard's piece, as well as the discussion from Germany about the youth work discussion in the last 5 years, I think puts a lot of things into sharp relief. And one of the things I wonder about in terms of the challenge for youth work is we continually, this revisiting of the conversation about how do we define youth work? What is youth work? And I wonder sometimes now, having knocking around in youth work for a very long time myself, I wonder if it's actually time to put that conversation aside in some way and to maybe think about youth work as a practice. So we have in the convention this idea, which is not a new idea, but I think a helpful idea about a community of practice. But maybe we should, accept the idea that maybe that youth work is a practice where there is some clarity of purpose, which is concerned with, say, to use that idea of revitalizing democracy, of trying to create more inclusive and peaceful and peace-filled society. So that's the huge ask of youth workers, is how do you engage with young people in ways that might do that? But what if we just thought about youth work as being something, I suppose, that was a practice, that there was a clarity of purpose in relation to that aspiration, hence the rainbow of a peaceful world, in some way associated with ideas around human flourishing, but grounded, but that those perhaps lofty ideals in some way, but realized in a variety and diverse approaches and contexts, and practiced by a variety of people in variety of ways. But that what people have in common is a commitment to a set of principles that are what we need to act from, and in some way then it is in that community of practice that we get to express those principles, to try and unpack them, not just in terms of what we do in youth work, but how we are as youth workers. So youth work is a way of being with young people as much as a way of doing with young people, that we get to talk about our practice in the ways, and again, you'll have, those of you who are involved in the MOOC will see that, is the idea that youth work, this notion of sort of practice architecture, while it's sometimes a bit of a challenging enough concept, I quite like the idea in terms of a scaffolding, a framework within which we can talk about youth work, not just as ways of doing, as sort of practice that is about doing, but also, I suppose, the idea that youth work would also be a way of relating, again, not just to young people, but to others and other professions who are interested and concerned with young people, so something around the boundary spaces, but also potentially to policymakers. So and how we talk to each other. So those ways of relating, and I suppose also then ways of thinking about the practice. And I suppose that for me is one of the things that really attracted me to this MOOC, was the opportunity for us to think about youth work. Because I think it's in the thinking of youth work and thinking about our intentions in youth work and the diverse range, I suppose, of ideas that we can draw on in pursuit of this revitalization of democracy, that perhaps some of the most useful ideas of youth work come from, to me. And again, I'm also conscious that in my particular context, it's maybe easy for me to think in that sort of way. And I suppose in relation to that and the idea that youth work is practiced at local level, I also think there is a challenge to youth workers themselves, however we define that, to also see themselves and begin to see themselves and potentially organize themselves as policy actors, not just reactors. That while we do work within the local context, it's really important that we can also look outward from that local context. And in the same way as perhaps in other fields, we talk about the idea of making connections between the local and the global, or to quote a sociologist that I really like, Charles Wright Mills, the idea of the sociological imagination is that idea of how we make connections between private lives in some way, or private troubles and public issues. That maybe that's also what we need to be doing as youth workers, is making connections between the lived lives of young people and what's going on at policy level, how those get represented in those spaces. And I suppose I think that part of how we might do that is also by perhaps becoming more research savvy and more engaged in research ourselves, both in terms of perhaps our own reflective practice, but also thinking about ways of thinking about research in ways that are consistent and helpful with the principles of youth work, so that the young people we work with see themselves potentially as people, not just the subjects of other people's research, but also potentially people who research and communicate that research about their lives and about their lived realities in ways that actually make young people more visible and more directly acting, I suppose, in those sort of spheres themselves. And then the other thing I think for me that I'd be really interested in is that youth workers themselves begin to tell their own stories and to write about youth work. And this is a conversation I had with Howard Williams last year. I think it is really important that youth workers themselves begin to write, so that we are not just written about, but also then potentially written out. I think that is really quite problematic. Oftentimes the voices of youth workers is somewhat silenced, and perhaps we sometimes give away too easily some of the complexity of the work and some of the processes. So maybe writing in ways that attend to process as much as the description of the work. That the work that we do is not only about the activities or the means to something. So let's unpack the activities and look at the processes that are going on there. And I think that will help to communicate something of the youth worker role in ways that might enhance and add some value to that to that role for youth workers themselves. I think to have some more confidence in our own competence, and see, as I said earlier, to see ourselves as actors in the context. I'm Irish. I could talk for Ireland, but I am going to stop now, and hopefully that has at least asked some questions and maybe pointed the direction for some answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hilary. Thank you for highlighting the role of youth workers in actually shaping the future of youth work. How we communicate as youth workers, how we communicate our practice, which we talked a lot also in our MOOC. What you can see now on the screen is actually the graphical representation or graphical recording from Colleen of what was said in the three inputs of Axel, Yuliya, and Hilary. We of course will put it later on Facebook and also on the MOOC platform, so you will have a chance to see or to remind yourself on, or to recall actually what was actually said during our webinar. I realize that it's very difficult to actually talk about the future of youth work. I mean, it's difficult to talk about the future anyway, but about the future of youth work is really difficult if you want to be still realistic, not to fall into this kind of dreaming only. And yeah, the dreams are good if they are somehow realistic. And I think it's they should be. So thank you for the inputs. We have a few questions on the chat. I think that I maybe start with there is maybe I start with Hilary, because it's kind of a after your presentation. Maybe it's, you were talking about that we should stay, or we should stick to the principles of youth work, and there is a question: how certain do these principles of youth work have to be? As certain is in inverted commas, so.
I think that's an interesting one, and I suppose I'll start with my usual: is it depends, you know. And I do think that that's the issue. I'm really conscious of the you know, I suppose the diversity of context in which youth work is happening, and you know, if you look even across Europe, never mind the wider world, what's happening at a political level in terms of the diversity of sort of political leanings, if you were to look at it like that. But for me, I think if we were able to accept that at a European level, that the notion of revitalizing democracy might be a role for youth work, then for me the principles then come from that. It's like, what sort of principles of engagement with young people will help to achieve that end? And so then it means we have to understand something about democracy. We have to understand something of the complexity of it. And then we have to think about what would be the ways that would work with young people, whether it's at those points of transition in their lives, whatever those are, that would actually develop in them the skills and the abilities and the competences, to use that word, to be able to engage in democratic life in a way that is meaningful in terms of shaping their own community, never mind, you know, casting a ballot. And oftentimes, for me, I think the unfortunate thing about democracy is that we often just think about it in ways of, you know, voting, that's how we participate in democratic life. But of course, we see much more vibrant examples of democratic life, and sometimes the struggles with trying to achieve a democratic experience for people. And I think that youth work, the principles should support that, if that's anyway helpful as an answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then the next question may be the question that was addressed to Yuliya. We can continue. And the question was, Yuliya, what mechanism or strategies do we have in place to cushion youth work from political stability?
I mean, the first reaction, I wish I knew. I mean, that would be like the great solution. But what I would reflect on is the way that indeed that like what Hilary was mentioning, that it's not happening like for the first time, let's say. It's something that, and it's actually something that we can actually build on this transferring the knowledge. And here I would think of this generational knowledge, and I'm not referring to the age, but more like generation of civil society organizations and activists who have already been through this, and also I just forgot the word, so I'll go with the other thought. yes, so solidarity is very important, and this is an internal solidarity that people are now having internally, but also like international solidarity, and also this experience and the strategies that people were having. This is also very helpful. What we were having in our situation is also this kind of help that were from, like, yes, sharing the experience was very important. And then also, like, what I was reflecting, that we are actually building on a lot on the work that have been already done. So these connections between youth workers, youth organizations, and young people, these programs, participants from our programs and everything, this also makes this like small or to some extent big groups of people where you can actually find support and also find common solutions. So this is not, I think, the exact answer to your question. And I think also now this is also the time when, because it's already been a few months where like the organizations and people can also look for some strategies more regarding the youth work, I would say, or more specifically to some spheres, or let's say, yeah. If I have an answer to maybe react.
Okay, thank you, Yuliya. There is a question that appeared now. Should the role of youth work be geared towards creating change or equipping young people to create change? I mean, it's a question to everybody. I think, Hilary, you were talking about it a little bit.
Well, Yuliya, you're in the middle of it. Do you want to start in your context? Do you want to start with that one, and then?
Yeah, I would go for a short one for equipping young people to create change, and this is what actually happening like now. So like student protests and different things, and that's what we are building on. And I would say that it is part of the youth work there.
One of the things I personally think it's probably both, you know, and again, of course, we have to look at what is youth work? Who is this youth work that we're talking about? Because of course, we probably should be more talking about youth works or youth works sectors, even within countries, never mind across Europe. So I think that idea of trying to build solidarity, to build alliances, not just among youth actors, so people in the youth field, whether that's youth research or youth policy or youth practice, but also potentially in other spheres that are related to building democratic life. I think it's probably important for us to act in those sort of spaces. And I suppose on a personal level, I think that the, say for instance in the Irish context, is the youth work, the National Youth Council of Ireland would see it's part of its role as building solidarity in the youth work sector. So it would also, I think, in that, see part of its role about representing youth work in a particular sort of way and communicating the value of youth work in a particular sort of way. So for me, it's both, but it is ultimately about creating the conditions, I think, where young people can themselves be actors in their own context. And I suppose I'm a bit taken with the idea at the minute in the world of John Lewis's idea of good trouble. You know, I think the realization of democratic life requires people who are prepared to be involved in good trouble.
Thank you. There was a comment actually that was made to what Axel was talking about the convention, and it's basically about well, there's a hope expressed in this comment, that there's a hope that for some countries there will be a roadmap on how better to institutionalize youth work. I would maybe add to it the question to you, Axel. What would you like to see as the result of the convention?
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe the most important question that companies ask since 2 years. So as I already said, so we should not overload the European youth work topic. by raising the expectation that from now on, after this convention, youth work in Europe works 200% better than now. And so we are not naive on that. And on the other hand, it's also not necessary. Because youth work in many places in Europe is still a very good working a part of young people's life. What we hope from as a result from this convention is that there will be a kind of a movement, a kind of people are getting inspired from all the different things they have heard, they have seen, and they have learned, so that they can extend their own horizon beyond their everyday's work and the knowledge they have. So if we reach this as a result of the convention, we have reached a lot, and a special and an extra added value would be if people also stay in contact after the convention, so that this convention is not a single event or standalone event that happens for 4 days and then everybody's going back with his or her usual work. So that would be our strong interest, and this is also our ambition.
Thank you. I would like to check with Katja if there are any more questions, if there is questions on Facebook as well.
It was one very technical question, and I'm not sure about the answer. It was the question about if the deadline already passed for participants to apply for the convention.
A practical question.
A practical question, yes, because people got more and more curious about convention after presentation. So maybe someone can answer.
So if I understood correctly, it was the question on the deadline for registration. Did I get this right?
Yes, for participants, okay. Yes.
Okay, so generally there is no open call for participating in this convention. We invited several stakeholders to compose delegations. So national youth ministries were invited to compose national delegations from their country, especially consisting of people from the policymakers level. Depends on the level you have in your country, so national, local, or regional level, a researcher, 1 or 2 researchers, and people from the youth work field of practice. Then in addition to that, we invited the youth organizations, international youth organizations. We asked, of course, the European Commission, the Council of Europe for sending delegations, some other organizations that are very active in the field of youth work, and also, for example, the national agencies. So usually you should have been in contact if there is an interest of participating with the national ministry. But I have to say that many of the national delegations are already composed. So I would say around 90% we already have received. As I already said, we cannot extend the convention to the largest. So I do not know how many people are participating in this MOOC at the moment. So there's always a chance for 1 or 2 people coming extra and getting a personal invitation. But if we have another 500, that would overload our workshops. But for all those people who are not participating in the convention, there will be also live streaming on all plenary events.
Thank you, Axel. Yes, this is exactly as well what Barbara wrote, that there will be available live streaming of the parts of the 3rd European Youth Work Convention, and you can see the website where you can find it. We also have one question. For me, it's more rhetoric question, but maybe it would be interesting just to think about it. Why there are political barriers in every country when doing youth work. So maybe one of our speakers would like to answer this question.
I'm not sure how easy it is to answer.
Yeah, it's very, yeah, for me, it's more like rhetoric, but maybe we also can think about it.
Yeah, I think maybe we keep it rhetorical
Yeah.
for everybody to think about. I think this is, there are no more questions, but I actually have, yeah, just to conclude a little bit, I said at the beginning of our webinar that we asked our MOOC participants how they imagine youth work by the year 2030, what the youth work will look like. I would like to ask these questions to our panelists, actually, to shortly reply, what do you think youth work will be like in 2030? Just to do the same exercise. Of course, it's voluntary, you don't have to.
Did you prepare Padlet,
Yes.
yes. For drawing?
If anybody wants, I will be more than happy, or we will be more than happy to listen.
I suppose I'll go my usual, which is, well, it depends. So it depends where you are and in what sort of context. But I suppose I am hopeful for youth work. I mean, I do think that I think that there is something in terms of how we can combine our passion, and I hear that from all speakers about the passion for the work, but also then bringing that into focus in some way and being very grounded in terms of how we think about it and strategize about it and work with others and collaborate about it. So I think that youth work, if we think about it as a particular way of relating to young people with intention and with a particular sort of focus, I think youth work will continue to flourish in a range of places and spaces. I do that, but it may not be called that, and it may be called something else in other sorts of contexts. I think we just have to live with that and embrace the messiness of it in some way and come back to finding the ways that we can collaborate together. Again, be simplistic, in pursuit of democracy, which, sure, why not? It's Thursday afternoon. What else will we do?
Thank you, Hilary. Yuliya or Axel, would you like, or you don't have to?
Yuliya is smiling.
Yeah. I was just checking. It's hard to check. Axel, not. Yeah. My first thought was, and I understand that I was also again thinking more local, saying like 2030 is having the identity, like the strong feeling of identity. And Hilary, you made a very interesting point of maybe it won't be called the youth work, but still the identity and the community and international cooperation and exchange that always serves a great inspiration, and but actually be grounded on the local level, on the experience and what is happening on local level, but having this international cooperation is a really great thing. But for me, this is also about identity a lot for those who are making youth work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have one voice from the chat that by 2030 some of the youth workers will be replaced by artificial intelligence. Well, I don't know. Yet for sure let's say the digital world is changing very quickly. We may see developments in this area. I'm not sure exactly these ones, but yeah, that's one of the voices. Axel, would you like to add something?
Yes, so my answer will be maybe a bit more a technical one. So my expectation for youth work in 2030 is that we reached all the aims that are laid down in the Youth Sector Strategy 2030 in the Council of Europe, and that probably 2 more conventions, so after the December one, have taken place in this 5 years rhythm, and hopefully they have taken place physically and not virtually.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important point, because we already have a lot of papers that are actually outlining the future, or they are outlining the perspectives of youth work. Now it's actually our task, I mean, saying our, mine as well, people who are involved in youth work, to make them work and to fulfill actually all those all those, let's say, promises and perspectives that are there in these documents. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yuliya, for your input, for your testimony as well, on talking about the situation in the country like Belarus, where youth work is heavily affected by the political situation, instability. Axel, for highlighting the role of the convention, which is coming soon, and we are looking forward to see what's going to happen there and what kind of perspectives are stemming from this convention. And Hilary, also, again, for your input and summing up a little bit and coming back to the identity of youth work and also highlighting the role of youth workers in shaping the future. And of course, I forgot to thank everybody from the team as well, Katja and Tanya and Marietta, who is there behind, and Colleen for being here.
Thank you, Katja, Darius, Hilary, Yuliya, Colleen, and Axel. And thank you, Marietta, for doing the back office between Facebook and Zoom. I think that it has been a really interesting discussion, of course, opening many more questions than answering them, but that is also the strength of youth work, to really challenge, to ask, to push, to pull, and to continue conversations that are important in young people's lives and for youth work practice. We talked quite a bit about making the stories heard, getting young people's voice heard, but also getting the youth workers' stories out there. So I see the end of this MOOC in a way, and this webinar contributing to kind of a stop. If we are climbing a mountain, we arrived at a stop, at a hut that will host us for the night, where we will be thinking more about how the first part of the journey went, what we want to change on the next leg, what we need to get as new skills maybe, or competencies, or new reflections, and then what supplies we need to get. So both Axel and Hilary talked a bit about the context and the supporting environment for youth work. And Yuliya gave us a really strong testimony about the realities that young people experience, but also youth workers experience on the ground. So it really has been an interesting conversation in the framework. We always try to do as the Youth Partnership, to have this conversation between policy, practice, and research ongoing, with strong engagement of young people. And the number of participants has been testimony of that, not only in the MOOC, but also in the webinars we have held, because in the webinars, we had many more participants than just the ones who are following the MOOC. So I wish all our students of the MOOC courage to get through the last parts of the modules. I was telling our co-instructors, co-facilitators, we only cried for 2 years to develop it, but you only get to cry for 2 months to get through it. But it's definitely been an interesting journey for us. And in the past, we used to say we will be zooming in or zooming out on something, but here we are in 2020, in October 2020. And officially, I can say that for this webinar, we are zooming out. So goodbye, everyone, where you are. Stay healthy, stay well, and motivated, and let's continue. Bye.
We hope this video contributed to your learning about youth work.